What are the most common pitch deck mistakes and how can you avoid them? Let's find out. Well, congratulations on completing the training. Now you know how to relate your pitch deck story. And as you start working on your slides, now you have an idea of how your story can flow and how you can make some adjustments to fit different audiences. Now, at a very high level, you always start by explaining the market need and how you plan to satisfy that market need. Next is you'd explain your strategy, validate your solutions, and provide proof. And last but not least, you would share your goals and then ask people to take action. So in this video, what I wanted to do is share some of the common mistakes I have noticed when working on pitch decks, and then that way you can avoid them. So now the first common mistake that I see all the time is the too much information, TMI. In a most recent project, I had someone send me an 80-slide pitch deck, and it's meant to as an introductory pitch deck. Now, no one has time to sit and read an 80-slide presentation or to sit through an 80-slide pitch deck. Pitch decks are meant to be a high-level document. It's meant to give you an idea of the overall of the projects, and if people ask questions, then you can add a bit more details. Pitch decks are also not a brochure. They're not a textbook. They're meant to be scannable. So whenever possible, try to limit the amount of content on your slide, and remember the rule of 3. If you use the rule of 3, try not to add more than 3 points. 4 or 5 might be doable. Definitely never go over 6 points per slide. It's just too much information. Another thing is to remember to adjust to audience temperature. When you're meeting people for the first time and it's a cold audience, you don't want to be dumping everything on them. So you want to stagger that information, give them teaser content so that they ask you for more information. And the more they ask, the more you can reveal to them. Now, if you do have a lot more slides and you feel they're critical to your story, you can add them to your appendix section. Add them, have them ready in case it comes up during the face-to-face conversation. You can bring up these slides and show that you are prepared. You might not necessarily send them as an introductory pitch deck. You want to keep that a very high level document, and you want to remember to keep confidential documents with you alone and only share them during the subsequent meetings or if you're closing the sale. Now, the second common problem I see is using the same pitch deck for everyone. That's when you're using the same pitch deck for all audiences during all phases of your journey. But now you know better. After taking this training, you know that pitch decks have different audiences. You have the investor conversation, that's you're talking to the funding agents. It could be internal budgets, outside financing, or even investors or government or nonprofit organizations, or even the stock market. If you are at the level where you are planning to reach the stock market, that's called investor relation. And you also have the market communication, and that includes any people who might be doing business with you. It could be people who are buying your products or services, affiliates, vendors, or sponsors, really anybody that you might be doing business with, and that would be corporate communication. It's something different than what you might share necessarily with investors. And of course, you have internal communication. You want your team to know your vision so they can help you bring your vision into reality. And another aspect that you might have to tweak is also based on your business journey. What you might talk about in the early stages of your business during the idea phase is going to be a different story from what you might share during the growth and the mature section. So you don't just want to create one pitch deck and use it for all. I do see some clients do that. They think, well, hey, why do I have a pitch deck now? Here's what it is. No, you do still have to make some adjustments. Keep the audience in mind and export a different presentation anytime you have to make a new presentation. And that's also a point about keeping it up to date, because just because you created a pitch deck last year, it doesn't mean it's relevant anymore now. You're going to have to continually update those slides with the numbers and the data to make sure the story makes sense. Now, another common problem I see is talking to the wrong audience, or as many people say, barking up the wrong tree. So you're presenting the wrong audience. Now, the wrong audience can be your investors. In many cases, the investors you would have in the idea phase are going to be different from the investors that you would have in the startup or the growth or mature phase. So you want to make sure that you are sending your pitch deck based on the type of investors that would be interested in your type of business. That also includes technology or non-technology, traditional or a startup. Different investors are interested in different things. So you want to make sure that you are not sending your pitch deck to the wrong type of investors. And that's why many people say, well, I sent my pitch deck to 100 investors. No one is interested. Well, the reality is, are you sending it to the right investors? So do your homework and treat your investors like a target market, just like you would do for your buyers. Treat that with investors. Try to find investors who are specifically interested in your industry sector, in your type of solution, and then they are more likely to listen to what you have to say. And the same thing applies to the buyers. If you are sending the wrong solutions to people who don't need it, then no matter how much you push that product or service on them, they don't necessarily need it. So you want to make sure that you're spending your advertising and even your pitch deck story and sending that message to the right audience as well. Now, another common problem I see is seeing pitch decks that are solution-centric. There's too much focus on the solution, on the product, on the service, and the technology. But now you know better. The pitch deck story needs to start with the market need, which is really the problem you are trying to solve. More specifically, because when you're talking to people, nobody is interested in your products or services or skills. They want to know what you can do for them. What problem can you solve for them? And once you get their attention about the problem, then they will ask you for the solution. And it's the same thing with investors. No matter what type of solution you have, if you keep talking about your solutions, they don't really care. They want to know, does the market need your solution? So you need to be focusing on the market need story, not necessarily too much on the solution. Keep the solution until they ask. That's not the introductory phase. The solution is more of the sales conversation. It's more of the demo. A pitch deck is more of selling the idea and getting people to ask you about your solutions. Now, another common problem I see is the one of competition. If you remember, that's the elephant in the room where some people have different varying points. And one of the most common things I see is people not doing their homework. They're not aware who is their competition. And in some cases, they just say there is no competition. I had that a few times, and I even had one client feel offended when I told him there is a competition. Because as he was telling me, HWAYDA, there is no competition, I'm Googling around and I already found 3 different competitors online, and when I sent him the link on the call, he felt defeated, as if I was trying to offend him or something like that. And my idea there was trying to help him. You need to know your competition. Sure, maybe you don't care, that's okay, but your audience will care. Investors are going to look to find out who else is doing a similar solutions. Your market is also going to look, before they buy anything from you, they're going to be doing their homework to find out who has a similar solution, what are the features and benefits, who has the better price. So you might as well be the one that brings it up. And then another thing, if you say there is no competition, well, then if there's no competition, then maybe there's no need for your solutions. So you need to bring up that conversation. And now you know how to bring it up. If you remember, we talked about the competitive analysis. So you need to know who is your direct and indirect competitors. You also need to have the competitive advantage story. So you need to say what makes you different or better. And if you are in a situation maybe where right now there is no competitor, or maybe no competitor in your area, you can say, you know what, we are not aware of any competitors right now in our space, but here's our competitive approach. So you do have that conversation where you can talk about competitive approach. So try not to avoid the competition because just because you don't believe in it or you don't think there is, people will be looking for competition. Now, another common problem I see is the no proof. There is no proof of the market demand, no proof of the value, no proof to show any traction that there are results. So the first proof you need to show is that there is a market demand. That's the first proof you need to show. And the second proof people are looking for is to know, can you get the job done? Does this project make sense? Does this product or service work as intended? And they want proof. And now, going through the training, you learned about different phases of proof. So for example, if you're starting something new and you still don't have a product or service proof or a company proof, you can talk about personal or team proof. What have you done in the past to show that you can get the job done? Who else on your team was on a successful project to show that they can get the job done? Or you can divert the conversation to a product and service proof. If it's a sales conversation, what proof do you have that this product or service works as intended? And that's when you can can show testimonials, case studies. And if you're talking to investors at the level of investing in the company and you already have something to show, well, you have to show project or business results as proof. So remember that conversation. You need to show traction, you need to show proof, and whenever possible, fill in the gaps before people even ask. Now, another common problem is the numbers don't add up. The business model, financial, and numbers just don't add up. And this is more specifically when you're talking about project management, or if you're talking to investors about a business investment opportunity. So this is where now you learned about the business model Canva and how all of these pieces all tie up to the price that you end up charging. So you have to factor in the customer segmentation and how much it'll cost you to acquire them. That relationship, how much is that going to cost you? The channels, how much will they cost you? The value to create the product, the activities, the resources, and the partners. All of these people needed to help you deliver your solutions. How much will they cost you? And does that number make sense? Because your cost structure needs to make sense. And in many cases, unfortunately, people who are presenting a pitch deck have not done their homework. They have not added all of the numbers, and then the numbers don't add up. So before you talk to investors or funding agents, you need to make sure that everything adds up. And another common thing you might be asked for is the common customer lifetime value and customer acquisition cost. In many cases, investors look at that as a way to assess, can your business grow and scale? Is there a way for this business to continue to make money? Because if your advertising and customer support costs are too high and you're not making a lot of money from each customer, then really there is no business here. So know your numbers and make sure that when you're presenting, your numbers add up. Now, another common thing I see is a weak strategy. There is a weak plan, or in many cases, there is no specific plan. It's just an idea. There's nothing to back it up. But now you know that when you're talking about strategy, you need to explain the big picture. So you need to show at least that you have a plan, or that you understand that a plan is needed. Even though you might not have all the steps right now, you want to show that you are aware and that you have it on your horizon. Whether you're working on it right now or you're hiring people, you need to bring this up before people ask you for your strategy and plan. And you also learn that your strategy can be different depending on the type of business. A startup strategy could be different from a traditional business strategy. A technology company strategy could be different from a non-technology strategy. And also the phase of the journey. Where are you? Are you in the idea, the startup, the growth, or mature? Each stage of your journey will have different strategies that you can talk about. But at a high level, at a very, very high level, if you just wanted to introduce the strategy, the high level, you need to be answering two questions. Is number one, how do you plan to introduce your solutions to the market? That can include also your project within your organization. How do you plan to introduce that? And the second thing is, how do you plan to scale and grow? So you need to be answering these questions from a strategy perspective. Now, another common thing I see is the unreasonable ask. That's when people are asking for too much money, or they're not clear on how they plan to use the money. Now, if you remember in the call to action section, we had a part about if you're talking to investors where you could add a slide on use of funds. How do you plan to use the money that you are wanting from the investors? Or in many cases, you can combine the contact us with the use of funds. So you need to be very specific about how much money you need and how you plan to use it. And you want to make sure that it's reasonable compared to the amount of money that you can deliver and the value that you can deliver to the market. Because in many cases, some startups say, hey, I want $1 million when they don't even have any sales. They think just because they have an idea that their idea alone is worth $1 million. When I worked on another project where the client was suggesting they wanted to charge $10,000 for a service that some other people are just charging $30 for. So you have to be reasonable and make sure that what you're asking from your audience is relevant to the value that you are providing. So as you build, update, and refine your pitch deck, make sure that it makes sense and that the numbers add up. And most of all, that you're talking to the right audience and that you're making adjustments to fit different audiences, because you want your audience to understand what's in it for them. This is really the purpose of the pitch deck. It's meant to be a short presentation that helps the audience understand right away what's in it for them. And in many cases, your audience might not be interested in your solutions, but if you're able to relate that story quickly and confidently, they're going to feel more confident to refer you to someone else, even though they might not personally be interested in investing, they might not personally be interested in buying your solutions, but if they know someone that can or is interested, then they will feel more confident introducing you and making that referral. So that's why it's very important to have this pitch deck story done right, whether it's the right audience or not, and also knowing who you are talking to so that you can make these adjustments. Now, I know all of this sounds easier said than done, and that you might still have some questions and need support, and I wanted to let you know that I am here to support you. So if you need someone to help you to review your pitch deck or to guide you step by step in person or through a group training, there are some options. So do check out the resources and the support section for more options for working together. I look forward really to seeing your completed pitch deck and most of all, hearing your success story. So till next time, ciao for now.